I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:07 p.m. We'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here. I would like to recognize Rod Waddell, one of our Jefferson Media students who's helping with the video presentation for Channel 20 tonight. I will have the coordinator call the roll. I'll do that in a minute.
Ms. Jackson?
Present.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Escobedo?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
We will now recognize and celebrate outstanding contributions of our students and staff. My first order of business is to proclaim April 10th through the 16th of 2016 the Week of the Young Child. I will read the following. Whereas the Rockford Public Schools and other local organizations, in conjunction with the National Association of Education of Young Children, are celebrating the Week of the Young Child, April 10th through the 16th, and whereas these organizations are working to improve early learning opportunities, including early literacy programs that can provide a foundation of learning for children, and whereas research shows that high-quality early childhood programs prepare children to have the greatest opportunities for learning in school and beyond, and whereas teachers and others who make a difference in the lives of the young children deserve thanks and recognition, whereas public policies that support early learning for all young children are crucial to young children's futures, now therefore let it be known that the Rockford Board of Education proclaims the week of April 10th through the 16th as the Week of the Young Child and encourages all citizens to work to make a good investment in early childhood, signed this 12th day of April 2016. So congratulations to the early childhood programs of Rockford Public Schools. We will now move on to our recognitions, and Mary Call will be making those presentations tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Dr. Jarrett, and the board. We are very pleased tonight to have a bumper crop of outstanding students here who have earned recognition. And because we have so many students here, we're going to do something a little bit different. I will ask that as your recognition is read, I would love you to stand. And then we will save the applause till later, but I would welcome you to stand as your recognition is read. And again, we will have applause at the very end for everyone. So to begin with, Auburn High School Scholastic Bowl team took second place last month at the IHSA Class AA Scholastic Bowl Finals in Peoria. The team lost in the championship round to Hinsdale Central, which is ranked second in the country. This is the same team Auburn beat in February at the National Academic Quiz Tournament. Auburn took first place in that tournament. This year's team had an impressive run, especially considering 6 talented seniors graduated last spring. Auburn continues to make Rockford proud, placing in the Final Four in the IHSA tournament for the past 15 years. Congratulations and good luck in your upcoming national tournaments at the end of May and early June. Please stand. Also, the team's captain, Cole Timmerwolke, would like to present something to Dr. Jarrett.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Great job,
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Auburn High School's boys basketball team took 4th place last month at the IHSA Class 4A state tournament. Senior Trayvon Tyler told the Register Star, We definitely leave with pride. We did more than anyone thought we could. This team joins the 2012 third place team as the only NIC 10 state place winners in more than a decade. Is there anyone here from Auburn? No. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Auburn High School's boys bowling team qualified for the IHSA state tournament in January. They represented Rockford well as the only team from RPS 205 to compete at the state level. You want to hear from the bowling team? Woo! Jefferson and Guilford High Schools each sent teams to compete in the IHSA State Chess Tournament in Peoria in February. Congratulations to the Jayhawks and the Vikings on representing Rockford in state play. Jefferson High School's Sabrina Stoltz represented RPS 205 at the IHSA State Bowling Tournament in February in Peoria. Thurgood Marshall School placed first at the 8th grade level at the IESA Chess Tournament in Peoria. Vincent Doe earned first place as an individual, also at the 8th grade level. Marshall's Jeremiah Davis, Sendao Inthavong, and Suresh Mamidi were each named runners-up in the tournament. 7th grader Charles Kang was a second runner-up in the 7th grade division. Jefferson High School's Tracy Davila took fourth place in the Illinois Girls Folk Style State Championships, a state tournament for Illinois girls wrestling. Tracy? After competing in the regional Poetry Out Loud competition, Jefferson High School sent 2 students to compete at the state level March 11th in Springfield for the Poetry Out Loud National Recitation Competition. Congratulations to first place regional winner Demetrius Markham and second place winner Katsia Ramirez. RPS 205 sent 3 teams to the first LEGO League Northern Championship Tournament in January. Congratulations to the Froberg Bricks of Froberg Elementary School, Thundering Mustangs of Thurgood Marshall School, and Is It Snack Time Yet of Eisenhower Middle School. We're proud of our students for participating in First LEGO League Robotics. The state held 2 tournaments this year, a northern and southern competition, because of an unexpected spike in qualifying teams. We'll recognize Froberg and Eisenhower at an upcoming meeting. Thurgood Marshall School took first place in February at the 33rd Annual Regional Math Counts Program. 4 mathletes, Kodai Spike, Sabrina Meng, Ayush Balavat, and Matthew Blessing competed at the state level in March. Congratulations. Guilford High School Cheer took 5th place in the large team division of the IHSA sectional to advance to the state tournament. The RPS 205 Communications Department highlighted Guilford's cheer team in a video in July. The team's goal was to return downstate for another shot in the IHSA State Cheer Tournament. Their trip downstate in February marked the Vikings' fourth consecutive trip to state. Congratulations on another great season. Okay, I would love to ask everyone again to stand. I would love the coaches and any parents who are here to stand as well, and we'll give you one big last round of applause. Thank you so much.
Great job. We are so proud of all of you and thank everyone involved in your success throughout your academic career in RPS 205. So thank you for being here tonight. We'll move on now to the petitions and communication portion of the meeting, where we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the right of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communications portion of our agenda. According to our Board Policy 2.230, the public comments portion of the meeting is limited to 30 minutes. The Board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you will be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. We only have 2 speakers tonight, and I will call those in a minute. I would point out that we have a clock on the wall to help you with your time for the 2-minute allotment, and we thank you for your interest and your cooperation. Our first speaker tonight is Dr. Brandy Brown, to be followed by Zika Davis. Good evening.
I'm here tonight for the cry of justice in our public school. There needs to be justice for a better school performance of African American students. There needs to be justice for a better school experience in Rockford for African American students. We need justice in the concern of the vacant teaching positions in our schools, especially the schools on the west side. What a crime scene it is for kids to go to school and not have a teacher there or scrambling in place. That's a crime scene. We need justice as schools in Rockford are crime scenes for failing children. We need justice for the concerns of teachers with negative prejudiced attitudes towards black students. We need justice for the many teachers that are not prepared or do not want to challenge the status quo that exists here in Rockford, and that's through learning activities, and that's also through engagements. For the many students, for many African American students, their school experience in Rockford is torture because of the disciplinary code, and schools have become the place where they learn how to feel inferior. We need justice, we need change, and I hate to bust your bubbles about what y'all celebrating what happened at the high school on Auburn Street, but let me tell you, that school is an example of apartheid. The kids that live in that neighborhood that walk don't receive the same education as those people who went to the Scholastic Bowl, as those other people that get to go to the other place. No, that's called apartheid, and that's racism. And that's systematic that you all continue to propose and stamp your names on and continue to allow happen here in Rockford. That's why we need justice.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Zika Davis?
Hello, my name is actually Sheikah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
My name is Sheikah Davis,
Okay.
and I'm here because my student is a student of District 205. My child was in the 6th grade for 3 weeks and was kicked out, yet she never got a fair hearing because I don't remember seeing any one of your faces. Her side was never heard. There's missing information, missing documents. I want my daughter's case reviewed tonight while you're all here. I want this case investigated. There's, like I said, there's missing information. Her situation was poorly handled, and decisions were made with poor judgment, causing a hindrance in my 11, now 12-year-old daughter's education. Decisions were made by careless adults. Documents were pushed through, and I don't believe any of you even seen it because I don't remember seeing any of your faces. My daughter's side was not heard at all. She was 11, only in the school for 3 weeks. She's never been in trouble, never been suspended, never had a fight. There was no weapons involved. There wasn't even a fight. The automatic expulsion and suspension stuff in 10 days and all of that is supposed to be if a weapon is involved. She was never even looked into. Her decision was made in less than a week. Less than a week. Where's my daughter's statement out of her packet? Where's the missing information? Where's all of the signatures that are supposed to be in there? Where was any of your faces in this so-called hearing and meeting that I had, which I never really had? When I got here, it was a decision already made. No one ever heard my daughter's side of the story. Why? Why? Is it because she's an African-American child? I want to know. And I have the right to know. Because of the Information Act, I have the right to know everything that was going on with my daughter.
Thank you. I'm sorry, your time's up. Thank you for your input. Okay. Are there any board member comments at this time? Ms. McCullough.
I want to take a minute to talk about the Trade Expo that occurred last week out at the Northern Illinois Building Trades Career Expo. I don't know if anybody saw the article in the paper about that, but basically it's the unions were represented by volunteers to introduce students from all around the community to the different trades, to carpentry and painting, large machinery operation, pipe fitters, plumbers, electricians, iron workers. Anyways, this is, I believe, the 6th year that they've been doing it. And this year, there were students from all over the community, Winnebago up north, Rockton, Hononegah, down south, Byron, out to Belvedere. But what I really want to showcase is how this got started, because I've been going to it for a couple of years, and this was the first time I learned about the background. We have a middle school teacher. She is an 8th grade teacher, and her name is Rhonda Brown. She's at Kennedy Middle School. And she was working with students who, she said, didn't seem to care about school and didn't understand why they needed to graduate from high school. What difference did it make? They weren't going to go to college anyways. I'm going to tell you that this is before the academies, before we ever started talking about career in college. And she said she needed to find a carrot to keep them in the system. And so she approached the trades about doing this, and she's the one who got this started. And it started with just RPS 205. But it started because one teacher who was concerned about students who didn't have a reason to stay in school, didn't see that they were going to be going to college, to give them a reason to really work. And so I'd like to applaud her, and I'd like to applaud all the tradespeople who were there volunteering their time to expose our students. One of the gentlemen said that the best thing that he's seen happening in RPS 205 is that not only are we exposing students, but he felt that the unions were touching those students at least 4 times with opportunities for careers. He said he saw them as middle schoolers. He saw them in high school at the Academy Expo. He saw them in their classrooms through their academy, through the BAMIT. And then he would see them again as high school students back at the Expo. So it wasn't just like a one-shot deal. The biggest problem is we just don't have enough opportunity to get enough students there, so I hope they're able to expand that next year. Part of that's the timing on it. But I just can't say enough for all these volunteers, and also, again, for Rhonda Brown for having come up with this concept and putting it together, and also for incorporating, students from all around the community. And by the way, in this newspaper, right next to that is a robotics fundraiser for are you going to talk about that? Yeah, okay, I'm going to hand that to you. But before I hand that to you, I do want to say one thing about all these groups that were here. When my students were in school, I recognized some of those same coaches coaching the teams that my students were in back at Auburn. Mr. Stokes and Miss Green, Mr. Ott. I mean, part of the reason these students are successful is because these are adults invested in them and their lives. And so I just don't think that we gave enough applause to those coaches and for the support that they offer, because believe me, the differential does not nearly cover the amount of time that they invest into those students' lives. So I'm going to let you talk about robotics.
Gobedo.
So yes, tagging along, absolutely right. Stipend doesn't necessarily cover. I know when I coach, one of the things we did is we simply, because it's just not fair to other coaches, we turn in some of those, actually those funds back to schools for further support. But it really takes, there's a lot of adults, just a lot of people volunteering to help our first robotics. There's a lot of issues, and there's always the top 10, but we never don't always point out the positive things that are happening. And one of the really positive things that's happening with robotics, it's really growing in Rockford. People don't realize, but Rockford, it's becoming a robotics town, and we hope that continues. There's a lot of people involved making this happen. I guess some of those have already been here. We know who those are. So there is a first annual robotics strictly for RPS. So first annual RPS 205 first robotics fundraiser, April 21st, 5:30 to 8 at Giovanni's Restaurant Convention Center. For more information, you may, if you're in the schools, you can always contact Ms. Chris McGee. Everyone's pretty aware with Chris and has her involvement in robotics. Or for more information, First Robotics lr@gmail.com. Again, all one word, First Robotics lr@gmail.com. April 21st, 2016, 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And just as a side comment here, we always hear about how nowadays our kids are more interested in cell phones and playing with their cell phones and not paying attention these kids are using their cell phone to program, to control robotic devices, and use these devices in a friendly cooperation manner. So everyone that gets a chance, don't forget, please support our Rockford First Robotics, April 21st.
Thank you. Mr. Rollins?
It just suddenly occurred to me that this is Dr. Weisman's last meeting with us. And I thought the occasion should not go without comment. Dr. Weisman was one of our first administrators that came over when I got on the board. I just want to say I've enjoyed working with you. I'm not saying anything that anybody involved in the district doesn't know, but if you're watching, you can't really underestimate the respect in which Dr. Weisman is held by teachers, staff, and the board. I've appreciated you for the time that we've had you, and we're going to miss you.
Well said. Mr. Connor?
Also about Dr. Weisman, personally speaking, what a great job he's done that I've observed. But let me just give one sort of personal story and insight is my background happens to be information technology. That is not Dr. Weisman's background. However, when I started on the board, he was a quick learner. He focused on it and did a really good job improving that function as an example. So it was very impressive to see just how focused he was and how committed he was. So I have to say, what a great job. I have to say, Belvedere, you did a good job in picking your next superintendent. So
Okay.
really, sorry to see you go, but I'm sure Belvedere is going to be very pleased. So thank you for your excellent work.
Well said. Thank you. I have one comment. I'd like to give a shout out to the Rockford Promise organization, the story that Karina Curry did on Rockford Promise, and the champion we have in our Deputy Superintendent, Matt Bosberg, who has been talking about the Kalamazoo Promise model for how many years? At least 5 that I know of. Okay. And this year, I got to attend a ceremony at Rockford University where 4 of our high school seniors were awarded full ride scholarships. 2 that were to Rock Valley and 2 to Rockford University. First time that this has ever been done. These students came from specific neighborhoods. 2 of the students came from the Ellis Heights neighborhood, 2 of the students came from the Midtown district. And so Erica Bibalou and Victoria Zwicky-Reed of East High School and Jennifer Rosales and Alondro Torres of Jefferson High School were the recipients. And it was a very proud moment, and I'm very thankful to Matt's efforts in getting this off the ground, and I'm sure Rockford Promise is going to have even more scholarships, and maybe someday it will be the full deal for anyone that's a graduate of our program. So congratulations to those 4 students. All right, let's go ahead then with any other board member comments. If not, we will move on to the consent portion of our agenda, including the following items: the meeting minutes of March 22nd, 2016, accounts payable, payroll, purchase orders, contracts under 10,000, construction bid request log, and travel. There were 3 bid recommendations, one for the tuck pointing at Roosevelt Community Education Center, West Middle School HVAC and electrical renovations, and Barber Elementary School improvement project. The recurring contracts for actuarial and benefits consulting services, the consulting services for school improvement with CEC, the following other consent items, including workman's compensation agreements. There were 2 of those: treasurer's bond, the public official special issue bond, and the freedom of information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the consent items read.
Ms. Jackson? Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
We are now then on to the closed session consent agenda items, including the HR organizational report and addendum, and the following student disciplines in which expelled or suspended students are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. Students DCC 7, DLJ 10, KJW 12, EMD 23, and JJM 21 are expelled for the remainder of this school year and the entire 2016-17 school year. Student LL 25 is expelled for the remainder of this school year, the entire 2016 school year, and the first semester of the 2017-18 school year. Student BLH 14 is expelled for the remainder of the 2015-16 school year and the first semester of next school year. And the expulsion of student CCH 16 is held in abeyance contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the remainder of this school year. The expulsion for students JAV 8 and MPW 9 are held in abeyance contingent upon the expulsion of abeyance agreement for the remainder of this school year and the entire 2016 school year, 16-17 school year. The expulsions for ILB 11, KLG 17, and JEM 24 is held in abeyance contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the remainder of this school year and the first trimester of next school year. The expulsion for CAB 26 is held in abeyance contingent upon the expulsion and abeyance agreement for the remainder of this school year and the second trimester of the 2016-17 school year. And the expulsion for KTDJ 13 is held in abeyance contingent upon the expulsion of abeyance agreement for the remainder of this school year and the first semester of next school year. And the following students have been granted a conditional probationary agreement, what we call EIAs now. These are students ANLF1, TGLS2, ASL3, AP4, KRP5, MCB6, OP15, KEB19, JLM20, NAM22, and ENF22. Is there a motion and a second to approve these closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rollins. Are there any items that board members would like to have pulled for separate consideration? Ms. Jackson?
11, 12.
11 and 12, okay. Okay, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the items not pulled.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
I'll take a motion and a second to approve item 11B, which was the HR organizational report and addendum.
So moved.
By Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Rollins. No discussion. Have the coordinator call the roll on the item 11B, the HR organizational report and addendum.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson? Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 abstain.
I'll take a motion and a second for the approval of the items listed under 12, which were the student disciplines that I read through.
So moved.
Mr. Connor moves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. No discussion. Have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the student disciplines under item number 12.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 no.
I would just like to mention at this point, due to travel restraints of our consultants, unless there are any objections, I'd like to change the order of the agenda for tonight and have Mr. Schmidt present item 17A, which is the secondary attendance zones. Any discussion on that change? No? All right, Mr. Schmidt.
Second as Robert gets the presentation up. The school board on 2015 approved the elementary attendance zones. The next phase of the process to look at the secondary zones. The board hired RSP and Associates, Robert Schwartz. They did the first demographic studies with the enrollment analysis to help us define the elementary attendance zones. They're continuing with that work on the secondary attendance zones. As soon as Robert's ready, he'll give a presentation of the findings that he has come up with and his recommended attendance boundaries moving forward.
All right, good evening. Glad to be here tonight. I think it's been about a year, as Mr. Schmidt indicated to you, and what I'm going to present to you tonight is kind of a little bit of an overview of what we presented to the committee. So we'll talk a little bit about enrollment so you have an understanding of the credibility of the numbers. That's important when we start talking about plans. And then we'll talk about a revisit of the elementary plan, and then we'll get into what the secondary plan is. So without further ado, for the benefit of those watching, as Mr. Schmidt indicated, we've been working with you all for, I believe, the last 2 years. We work with school districts through the Midwest, quite a bit of work up here in the Illinois area as well. In order for us to do what we've been able to do to this point, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of people that have been involved in this process, and so this slide, this page is to really give credit to them, because when we get into the accuracy of what we've been able to do and what this plan will mean to your district, there's many people behind all of the different data sets to make this happen. So 3 things that you need to understand about your district. We're showing that it's going to be stable with slight decreases over the next 5 years. You're going to have adequate capacity at each of the different levels in your building. A lot of that attributed to the decisions you as a Board of Education have made, specifically at the elementary level, since that plan's already rolled out. We also know that there's limited residential opportunities, and much of that was discussed in a little better detail at the committee level. So when we started out with your district, we had to understand geography. So we have a district map, which is represented here with the purple line, and then we show the city limits. We then break the district into what the existing high school attendance areas are, what the existing middle school attendance areas are, and what the existing elementary attendance areas are. We go one step further where we have broken the district into what we call planning areas. There's almost 900 of them that we're monitoring enrollments, demographic and development information to understand what's happening in each of those roughly 900 areas. Zooming in a little bit closer to, I believe, Spring Creek Elementary, you can see the power of this information that the county, city, and school district data has provided in understanding how this all aggregates to these planning areas. The green line represents the planning areas, the solid colors the elementary areas. You can faintly see the parcel lines. The dots represent where students live. There's multiple students in some of these households. All of this kind of helps us understand where students are and how that may relate to where the students may be attending with the different programs that are offered in different buildings. So if we take a moment and look at where you've been and where you are now, you can see some things that have changed a little bit, particularly when we look at that kindergarten class. In 10-11, you were over 2,000 students. Here in 15-16, you're just a little bit under 1,900 students. Another thing to take a look at is when you look at your senior class, it's typically significantly smaller than your next year's incoming kindergarten class. So that's where we see the bulk of enrollment change, or what would be positive increases. The other aspect of that is when we look at that data and we see what change has been happening at each of the grades, you can see that most grades have seen decreases as they go from kindergarten to first or third to fourth, but the greatest decrease being from 9th to 10th. If you can see, this is something that has been a larger number here in recent years. We don't exactly know the whys because that's not in the data, but the model is forecasting what we see with some of these trends. We look at some other information like who's new to the district, so this is in migration, so who was new in each of these years, and I show on those bottom two bullet points what that's been the last 2 school years. So you can see it's pretty stable, a little over 2,200 students that are new to the district that were not attending the previous school year. We look at out-migration. These are students that were here the previous year but not attending the current school year. In this case, since I'm showing you the last year as well, and you can see that for this current school year, there are more that left the district than stayed in the district. And so that gives a negative loss of students. And again, that's shown as well in the grade tables. We have some baseline demographic data that we look at from the census. I'm not going to read each of these bullet points. This is really just a value add for you to understand some of the data. Basically, you're having fewer students attend the district than what you had in years past. So it's a smaller yield rate for every 100 units. And that's typically why you see a declining enrollment. At the committee level, a committee member asked for this particular map, so this is something a little bit different. What we've aggregated is I believe it's the 5 to 19-year-olds, and shown a density so you can see where the school-age children from census estimates out in 2020 might be. And this kind of parallels fairly well with some of the heat maps of where we actually are seeing students here in the 15-16 school year. And so, because of the value of these planning areas, this particular map shows you where we've seen enrollment change. The orange is for increases, the green is for decreases. The darker the orange, the greater the increase. The darker the green, the greater the decrease. Again, the value of these planning areas, you can see there's a lot of different change. If we zoomed in to a tighter extent, you would see some areas where it's increasing. Adjacent to it, in other subdivisions, it's decreasing. So there's always a change in each of these planning areas, and that's why the way we're looking at your district is very important to understand some of the changes. Another way that we look at the data is this heat map. So where these students live, where they've been geocoded, the red areas represent the greatest density. So you can see we have a corridor that, if we went back to that census map, will kind of map out very similar to what we're seeing with census data, which is not as granular as our information or analysis with your student data, but yet still gives a similar picture. So a little bit about developments. We always like to show some baseline data from specifically the city, and so you can see we've had very little residential development in your community. We've looked at some things with our meetings with the city to understand where some infill, maybe some other low-income housing might be occurring to understand again how that may impact your enrollments. You can see that's the blue line. The red line represents the enrollment change that you've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. And then the green line represents the census population estimates. And you can see that's below zero. And so the census has showed that there's students, or not students, people that are actually leaving your community. We want to try to reverse that. We want to see more people moving to the Rockford area. We also look at some of the existing and future land use maps. This is a map of the existing land use. Yellow areas representing residential, green areas the agriculture, but where we may see possibilities for new developments. So again, knowing what's in the ground, much like knowing where the students live. We've, through our meetings with the city, we've targeted some areas that they think might see some either infill or new activity. There could be other areas on this map that happen. As I probably mentioned to you last time, there's really two things that have to occur. The person who owns the property has to want to develop. The second point is whatever they're going to build, there has to be a market for it. So this could be something that changes fairly quickly as whoever owns the land wants to see something built. So as we get into the enrollment projections, the only thing I really want to say about the model is it's a mathematical formula, and it's pretty awesome from what we looked at last year and what we forecasted for this year. And as we look at the results here on this next slide, you can see over 99% accurate, whether we looked at the elementary level, the middle school level, high school level, or even the district level. If we broke this out by grade, it's the same way. So there's something our model is very much picking up on. What's great about that is as we look at the enrollment plan that you've put in place for the elementary schools, that gives a lot of credibility to what decisions you made at the last point, and how you tabled some decisions based on where the two new elementary buildings might be located. You're going to start thinking about what that next iteration is, but that's not specifically what we're here tonight for. We're really going to be focused on the secondary. So as you look at this particular graphic here, we're showing what that breakdown is for the projections at the elementary, middle school, and high school. Primary colors you can see are the existing enrollment numbers, and as we get into the pastel colors, that's where we see the forecast. The big thing that stands out is the elementary numbers are going to be quite a bit lower than what they are now, and we see the middle school slightly increase, and we see the high school slightly decrease. So as we get out over 5 years, that's why we have fewer students in your district than we have here in 15-16. Again, you can go back to some of these other tables to reference and understand why that's happening. So as we get into the recommended plan, I wanted to touch upon the elementary transition schedule. So remember, what you approved was something that would take into account changes, and it's reflected on the address locator that's out on your website, so your patrons, residents, anybody will know what school they would attend now and what they would attend as some of these actions take place. And so just a quick rehash, you can see what we've left you in this presentation is what that was going to look at like as we move through each of the current school years. See a question?
Mr. Connor had a question.
So back on your slide on past, current, and future enrollment, if you look at the high school numbers, actually, and I couldn't question your projections, but one of the things I will say is if you look at the high school numbers, those actually look pretty stable to me. So that the point would be, in spite of population going down, in spite of the elementary numbers or kindergarten numbers specifically, they're actually, kindergarten numbers are in a range, I think you said 19 to 2,000. But if I look at the high school, one of the conclusions has to be that's actually a pretty stable number, because even if I accepted the 7.5 number for 2020-21, that's really no different than it was in 2010, 2011. So the point would be, from a planning standpoint, given those numbers, that's a fairly stable population in terms of high school enrollment.
Yeah, if we go back to 2010-11 as that benchmark, we've seen more kids, and then now it will be back to what it was in 10-11.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
Yeah, and so because the other thing is, obviously, the numbers seemed, even over the next couple of years, fairly stable in spite of the loss. And then, I guess one of my questions would be then is there any way to project, if I might call it, essentially why those numbers will remain stable? Because if the population, on the elementary side looks to be going down, that number should be going down, but it's stable. So it's kind of an interesting progression.
And if you go back to the page that shows the enrollment district-wide by grade, you'll see that pig in the snake effect where we're seeing some larger classes move through.
Right.
But if we continue to have kindergarten classes that are less than 2,000 students, that's where, if we get beyond this 5-year projection, we may start to see smaller classes at the middle school. And then if you go further out, you start to see that ripple effect as they move into high school.
I guess, so one of the conclusions that I would draw, though, is that it seems that the high school level might, in fact, be doing okay, and there's a question about the ripple effect, as you mentioned. So that, to me, would be a trend for you going forward that we should really look at. And I know in committee we talked about looking at the number of potential children. That's why that one slide was added, I think. So from my point of view, if we re-engage you on this, that would be one of the things I'd really be curious about, because I'm not so sure. I mean, at an aggregate level, you're correct. If your kindergarten goes down, more than likely the whole thing will go down. Certainly our numbers have gone down, but with that high school still being steady, I think that's a trend that I'd like to know more about as we go forward.
Perfect. I will make a note of that for next steps. So again, back to the transition schedule.
You had a question? I didn't see your light on.
That's okay. I was going to wait until the end, but it actually relates to Mr. Connor's question. So, part of our strategic plan is to increase our graduation rate. And what assumptions did you make in coming up with these numbers in terms of a graduation rate? Are you assuming we'll be successful in increasing the graduation rate? Are you assuming the existing graduation rate will remain in effect?
I would say, if we go back to the slide where we show the cohort change, grade by grade, we've seen an increase, I believe, from that 9th to 10th grade for a decrease in students. So the model is going to look that if that's something that's starting to happen, it's either going to be that or a little bit less. So it's...
You're assuming then the current trend, whatever our current trend is, will continue.
Unless we get some data, let's say when we're doing this next year, and we see some positive results on what that retainment is cohorts-wise, that would be something that would be a major reversal in what your enrollment outlook could be. But we have to use the latest data, and that's why it's a little bit different than what we had last year. And the important thing is we don't know the whys, and that's something that we're working with administration on the exit surveys to know what that is, so we can create some different variables that, as you have your objectives on your strategic plan, it could be more fully integrated into what this model would forecast. Great questions, though. All right, so one of the things once we were tasked with what we're doing here this school year was this best planning practice, and that should be a familiar terminology for you from what we had last year. And I want to read each of these because I think this is important, because it's the aggregate of each of these bullet points that gets at the solution that's being recommended to you. So efficiently utilizing the available middle and high school capacity, trying to consider walkability where practical, having contiguous areas, so eliminating or not having islands, minimizing the number of split elementary schools to the secondary, and you'll see we've tried to do that. It was very challenging with where schools were located and how to create a feeder system that would be workable with the capacities that are available at the middle school and or high school. The educational programming, so the ELL or TBE, being factored in how to assign students, and you're going to see that we changed where that programming would be based on where those students are located. Assist with best physical location for that secondary bilingual educational programming, keep as many students as possible in the existing attendance areas, utilizing the transportation network and other natural man-made features to create the boundaries, and then creating logical attendance areas that will minimize some of the potential negative situations with transportation. So that was the best planning strategies as our team was looking at what could these boundaries look like. We have a little bit of the philosophies that we went through because we have where the students reside, we have their programming, so we not only have the TBE students, we have the gifted program at Auburn High School. So how do we factor all of that in making the decisions to say, here's what a good boundary will look like for the middle school and the high school. So that's some of the philosophy that we had, the best planning practice. We utilized from the district what the capacity would be for each of the middle schools and high schools, and this became key in knowing with however anything was moved around, we wanted to minimize having students that would be over the capacity for those buildings. And one of the things that is recommended in this plan is a phasing approach, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. And I think that was to minimize some of the student change, also to give advance notice to the students and the parents to know, hey, there is going to be a change and we want to help you plan what that change may be. And so some of the things you see on this off to the left is we moved the bilingual program from Eisenhower to RISA and then from Guilford to Jefferson High School. A lot of that came out of those heat maps of knowing where those students are and getting back to those best planning practices of trying to have more students that would have the ability to walk to their schools. So what we are showing with the boundaries is when we talk about this phasing, and I want to talk about these bullet points, is for the middle school it would be this year's 4th grade class because the changes for the middle school would not take place till 17-18. So it would be this year's 4th grade when they become 6th graders in 17-18, they would be the ones that are impacted. We look at the high school, it would be the existing 7th grade students that would be impacted by this change. Now, this takes out the TBE program students because they're going to these other buildings. It takes out the gifted students because that program's remaining at Auburn High School. And so we really try to get at the reside and then where they likely may attend based on geography, based on some of this programming. So what this looks like, and this was all the data that's on that large map, the 42 by 42. So we show what the data would look like for the middle school. Where we have the yellow is where it exceeds the capacity, but you can see that it's maybe slightly over because of the phasing, but then goes under the capacity for RISA. We look at Kennedy Middle School, it just goes over by 1 student when we get out to 1920, but then goes just under the capacity, so they're going to be very efficient based on this boundary. We also have the high school data that's on that map. You can see East High School, because of phasing, they're over what their capacity is, and they get below their capacity, right at their capacity as we get out to 2021. We also have on the map what this feeder pattern would look like. The light red areas are those that are broken at the elementary as they move to the middle school, where we see the hatching for the blue for the middle school. You can see where that potentially is broken as well. So we want to give you some visuals on the map to understand, as well as seeing what's on those maps, how that actually, that change looks. So if we look at this transition schedule with the phasing, what we've created here is a table that you can see as you go across the school year. You can see in 16-17 everything stays the same. It's the current boundaries. But then when we get to 17-18, this is where we're saying that this current fourth grade class, when they're sixth graders, this is when the new boundaries goes into place. If you go across over to the ninth grade, you can see that's when the boundary goes into place for them as well. If you're in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, you stay at the same boundary that you're at now. So you can see as it staggers through, as we go down each of those years, by the time we get to 1920, the middle school is fully integrated into the plan, and by 2021, the high school is 3 grades in the middle school, 4 grades in the high school. Because of this being a phased approach, we minimize the number of students that would be impacted by the boundary change, because it's contained by what we know right now as the 4th grade students and the 7th grade students. The overall SIBC will be known in actuality next school year when we know who that 5th grade class is and 8th grade class as they move into 6th grade and 9th grade. So you can see we're at about ironically, almost 14% for both the 4th grade and 7th grade that see a boundary change, and that's of 4th graders and of 7th graders that are not TBE and that are not gifted. We show what that breakdown is for the students by building, so you can see how this looks. Again, this is on the map, so you can see how this all fits. You can see the students that are impacted by the boundary change for the 4th grade and 7th grade as well by each of those facilities. So that is the 100,000-foot view of what's been worked on by our group for really the last 3 months, working through this plan to try to get something that, again, goes back to those best planning principles, the similar best planning principles that we use for the elementary boundaries, but expanded and used a little bit differently because middle schools have a larger reach because of their capacity. Same thing with the high school. So I open up to maybe some other questions you guys have, and just like last time, if I don't have the answer, we'll get back with Mr. Schmidt to pass that information on to you. But ready for your questions.
Mr. Connor?
So maybe I'm old school, but it says under your second bullet, be nice for numbers, but anyway, where it says Board of Education may choose one of the following options, and there's only one option, and maybe I'm missing something, but what would be the other option?
I always say other options because sometimes board members come up with another option.
Okay, because it said following options, which I read literally, and I was like, okay, there's only one.
But we only have
All right.
one option. RSP's only come up with one option.
Okay, just was curious. So a couple little things. You mentioned very specifically the gifted on slide 51 on your SIBC, and I looked for it before and didn't see like Kappa and some of the other things. Where would those programs be assumed? As you were calling out gifted, I wondered why that and not some of the other programs?
That one I would default to coming back as we talk with administration on what specifically gifted meant. From my understanding, it was the program that was at Auburn High School.
Right, Kappa is also at Auburn. That's why I was curious.
So it may be classified in the whole gifted
Yeah. Oh,
selection.
okay. So from the method side, and I know this is a nit, and maybe it's because I'm getting old, my eyesight's not so good, but on the middle school map, I was looking for west boundaries, and this is slide 45, and man, I was having a hard time finding it, so it's probably there, and I missed it, but when I looked for it, it was hard for me to see. The other thing is, talking about being contiguous, there's kind of an obvious, if you will, finger that's in the middle school boundaries, and I think that's Eisenhower, that kind of goes between a couple there, and it just jumped out at me because it goes pretty far south and west. So I just wondered about that one. Yeah, where it shows, you see, yeah, right, no, up. Yep, just a little. Keep going. Keep going. There you go, right there. And if you go at an angle, like a 25-degree angle, right there, that's kind of a little finger that kind of sticks out and looked a little odd to me from the contiguous design principle or best practice.
And that's where we tried to follow the elementary up into the middle school and the high school. And if you go back to our elementary boundaries, see if I have that map.
You're on elementary now, 17, 18.
Part of that little finger is.
As you can see, we have.
Yeah,
that-
but it looks like it's part of the one, though. Are you on 39, maybe?
I'm on slide 36. What's going to be different if you're looking at the presentation up there, because I condensed some of the slides. So if you go to the one that says 1819,
Yep, all right.
which is probably a few slides back, probably 30.
Yeah, it's 40, at least that's the numbering I've got, so, but it's still,
That's Carlson Elementary. That juts
oh,
down.
that juts down. And what's the kind of, the one right next to it, just south of it? That is.
Bloom. Bloom Elementary.
That's Bloom? Okay. I mean, I think the only comment, and I've been looking at these, and the only thing I'll say is, and I'm not second guessing this, is that the only thing I'll say is when it's horizontal orientation for some of these, and there was actually a number of them, it just seems like sometimes that comes out with sort of odd results, but, you know, and again, I know you looked at the numbers. I'm just saying when you look at the map.
And that's a great comment, because when we were initially doing this, if you go back to our best planning practice, we wanted to ideally have every elementary school completely feed into a middle school that fed completely into
Sure.
the high school.
It's not possible, I know.
So this became that building block from what was approved on that initial elementary boundaries for
Yep. No,
what
I
would be
remember.
phased out. If we wanted to go against that best planning practice,
Yeah, no, not saying that. I just, as long as I understand where that one came out, it just kind of struck me. So, okay.
So a general comment, I guess, is that Mrs. Jackson made a comment at the Operations Committee that I actually agree with, which is it's traumatic for us to change boundaries, and it would be nice not to have to do this all that often. And it is a little bit concerning to me to see that so many of our schools were actually projecting to be so close to capacity. 3 of the middle schools, and it looks like 2 of the high schools. Because even though, I guess I'm going to try to be an optimist here, even though we have some population trends, negative population trends, we do hope that we'll get our graduation rate up. We hope, at least I hope, Rockford is a community that for the past 20 years has sent an unusually large number of people, of its children, to private schools. As we get a reputation for a better product, I hope some of those people choose to send their children to our schools. Many of the people sending their kids to private schools would be in the Guilford attendance zone, which is being shown at a 98% capacity. If we're successful in doing those things, if we're successful in increasing our graduation rates, if we're successful in convincing people that we've got a good product and that they don't need to pay private tuition to send their kids to private school, where do we send them? That's just a rhetorical question.
Right, okay.
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I guess my comment on that would be is we haven't seen that. We want to see that. So it hasn't happened yet. But I'm an optimist, so I'm hoping it does happen. So that's Ms. McCullough.
Just a tag team on Mr. Connor. You mentioned Kappa, but you also have ROTC at Auburn, just to make sure we have the special programs captured and gifted. There's 3 programs for the high school. The other high schools, like with the construction, we don't have students attending from outside their zones, correct? East?
At East, a construction program.
Do those students, do we have students attend there from outside their zone?
How many, I'm not sure.
And Jefferson doesn't have anything? And Guilford does not? Okay.
Yeah, they do.
What do they have?
East also has the sign language program, and Jefferson has, I believe it's aeronautics, and there's one other, machine tools. It's all on the website, all the special programs are.
I just want to make sure that we're taking those numbers into account, especially when
Yeah.
you're close.
They're all very few.
But those are smaller programs.
Correct.
Shrinking it more.
Mr. Connor, do you have another comment? Or
What I was going to say is, so, going off what Mr. Rollins said, so I think it's a good point, and I think Ms. Jackson's point's a good one on the boundaries. The one thing that I will say is, as the high school academies get, from my point of view, more advanced, and I know we've talked a lot about this, is there are some classes that we're hoping to offer, and the one that I always bring up is hopefully someday we'll have a Mandarin language course somewhere, and we'll probably have to pull kids from all over. But I'm assuming there are some things where we do have special programs because it's impossible to replicate everything. I would think that as part of this study, that is something that we really, and maybe this is Education Committee, I really don't know, but one of the things as I studied all this, some of the same things struck me is, if we do have an increase, what would we do? But I think also the thing I'm going to say is, there is a flexibility on some of these programs and a draw that I'm hoping will occur. And it is something that in terms of planning numbers, I agree with Mr. Rollins, to have the assumption of 98%, I think is, and maybe it's just there's no way around it, but I think that there is something in terms of flexibility for the programs and some of the educational needs that I think we do need to consider. So whatever the appropriate venue for that is, I'd want to make sure that we use these demographics as part of our planning, especially around the programs.
Mr. Rollins?
I guess I'll make a more specific request or suggestion. We have a 5-year strategic plan that is going to include some specific benchmarks, which I don't think we've approved yet, but tied to the graduation rate. I would think that when we do our demographic assumptions, we ought to assume that we're going to be successful in hitting those benchmarks. So have we done that? Should we do that? I mean, I don't think we should be adopting a facilities, whatever, this isn't a facilities plan, but whatever this plan is, an attendance zone plan or whatever, by assuming that we're going to fail on our strategic plan. So I would think at a minimum, we ought to factor that in.
Great suggestion.
I can respond, and maybe Mr. Schmidt too might want to delve a little more into that. When we're looking at data to create the plans that we have, what our task is to look at that data and say, here's what that likely outcome will be. So it's not that we're being pessimistic in this, it's the data is guiding what the likely outcome will be. The advantage you as a board have done is this is an annual review of what's happening with the projections or with the enrollments. So if we start to see some of these things that you're targeting and you're changing your program to adapt and equip teachers and influence students to come into the system, we're going to pick up on that with the data. And that's where in this plan there is some flexibility that when you look at where we might see potential increases of, let's say, high school enrollment. If we look at Guilford High School, what could end up happening is we shrink what that boundary is because we have space at Auburn High School, so the area around Auburn High School could increase. Another way to look at this is if the specialized programming or this gifted programming takes off as more students want that and you're able to provide the teaching and space for those programs over at Auburn High School, you could see that there's space there for that to occur. So there is some flexibility based on the programs that you have and where they're placed in the building. So it's not so willy-nilly. There is some strategy in what we see with these numbers. And I don't know if That hit it.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes, so Eisenhower moving to RISA, right? Was racial ethnic demographics taken into account in any way or form?
Yeah, what we looked at there was who was in need of that program and where they lived, and that drove, again, going back to those best planning practices, trying to create more walkable situations for students with where the programs would be located.
Okay, so I guess what I'm getting to is I'm concerned that at the RISA level, we're going to have heavily one ethnic population it's not going to be balanced. So it's a concern that we're already a very, very high percentage of Hispanic population is not going to be balanced. I am assuming, I guess, what's transitional bilingual education? What's the demographics there at the middle school?
We can come back with those specific numbers of how that breaks down with the ethnicity through there, absolutely.
So that's just a concern.
Mr. Escobedo, if I could just weigh in on that, one of the things we got as part of our audit when the state audited our bilingual program, there's about a 25% ratio or rate right now of students who are opting out of the program, and one of the when they talk to students and families as part of that process, one of the primary reasons identified was the time on the bus and the distance from the school. So this was attempting to, by not only incorporating best practice, but also incorporating recommendations from the state as part of that process. That programming ideally should be located closer to where students live, and hopefully then increasing the percentage of students that do accept those services. So that was the other piece that was driving this.
And then a couple other minor comments. So when we look through the charts, we show 20 students moving from one school to the other and so forth. But when we look at some of the schools, we got 15, 25% mobility rate. I guess as a parent, it's as frustrating as having to change schools. So to piggy up on some of the comments, so I guess something to consider as a parent, and I'm hearing that from a lot of parents as well, that it's frustrating when your kid is going to one school and then another one is up in a different school and so forth. So just to take that into account, I guess. The other minor comment is that so here we're changing bilingual program again from one place to the other. One of the perception seems to be that the bilingual program gets to be moved around quite a lot, whether that's right or not. I'm just throwing that as a perception from the community. That's all.
Mr. Rollins, you had another?
Well, I just want to follow up on what you said. So I did hear what you said, which is, well, if we are successful in increasing your graduation rate, we'll redraw the boundaries, which was my point. That's traumatic for people. I mean, people, they buy houses, they want to know where they're going to send their kids, and when we redraw the boundaries every couple of years, people are unhappy about that. It's every 5 years. 5 years is not a long time. So I guess I'm throwing that out there, and I understand that one of the missions was to try to track the elementary school boundaries as much as possible, but I'm wondering if there isn't a countervailing interest here that would say maybe that shouldn't be the overall or the rule that has the highest priority, and maybe we ought to be trying to balance these secondary school attendance so that we have a little more fluctuating capacity at each one of the secondary schools for any changes that occur.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Siegel.
In the collecting your data, did you factor in the annual mobility rate in the district, which I think you were explaining to me, Mr. Schmidt, that it's about 20% district-wide?
Yeah, absolutely. The change that we see, a lot of students may move from one subdivision or one apartment complex to another. Where we see some of the changes that are occurring at each of those 900 roughly planning areas, that's factored in. So when these numbers come out as we're forecasting out 5 years, we know there's a certain amount of mobility that's occurring, and that's how it's kind of factored in to say, here's the number of kids that potentially will live in a particular area, whether they're a first grader or 10th grader or any of the other grades.
Was there a relief or congestion factor considered in determining the capacity, not the capacity, but how close to capacity the schools were going to be based on that mobility? Because I guess I'm just thinking a lot of these schools are really very close to their capacity, and a 15 to 20% mobility rate seems like that could create a very large margin of error or margin of change that could be a little difficult to account for.
Ideally, when we go back to those best planning practices, if you could equally weight them, or you put a higher influence on one of them over another, it could drive the solution a different way. One of the things that we recalled from the elementary plan was trying to minimize the number of students that would change. And we've had a lot of conversation about trying to have that complete feeder. So that way you know when you're in first grade how that works. So that's how you kind of, when you go back to all those best planning practices, we try to weight them based on what would fit into your strategic plan as a successful outcome for each of those buildings or the student experience at any of those buildings. The result, by having a weighting factor for a complete feeder or neighborhood schools or walkability, those kind of influence where, if you go back to that heat map, we have that band of the highest concentration of students. To whittle your way through to create a boundary would probably be more challenging and result in more change needed as you look 2 years and 3 years down the road. Maybe not a succinct answer, but it's not so easy when we start applying all of those best planning practices. And again, one of the things that we were told was not to weight one higher than the other, but we knew that there was a drive to have, particularly when we got into some of the state things with where the TBE program is, to try to improve those students that would be in that program, so enrolled in that program, having more walkable areas so you can minimize some of your transportation dollars. Those things kind of drove probably a higher influence on what we see here. If we wanted to focus on, let's say, demographics, it would be a very different plan if that was something that the community or the board wanted to see.
Ms. Jackson, I think you're trying to hit your mic there, and it just won't go, huh? There it goes, okay.
So is this coming back to the board for a vote at the next board meeting? Okay, so there were concerns, recommendations that were made tonight. How does the administration, and how do you plan to incorporate those and bring those back to us prior to the next board meeting?
I would just interject that we're going to need some legal guidance on that. The board has to, taking board recommendations into account, we have to be very, very leery, and so I'm glad Mrs. Holdley's back. She can talk about how much flexibility we have to take board recommendations on changes to the, we start to get into a very slippery legal slope, is what I understand, when we deviate from letting an outside demographer make decisions. So I'll turn that over to you.
I think the concerns that I heard being raised, because I was just standing right behind here, was primarily dealing with the capacity of the buildings. And as long as I think the board stays arm's length in this and just gives the general guidance, which is what has been done and can continue to be done. So it's not that the board members are standing there drawing the actual boundaries, but providing the general principles. I don't see any reason why the demographer can't go back and try to adjust it to address some of the concerns that were raised.
And that was my question. So you guys plan on addressing that before it comes back to us at the next board meeting? So we have 2 weeks, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if we get direction from the board to do something, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of them was to reconsider, and I know Mr. Schmidt heard them as well, so we can go back and, I think Ms. Fromm can detail out all of the concerns too and bring them forward, and that way then you can have some specific guidance.
So I'm thinking at least a week maybe a week or so, because the board meeting
We might
is
be
in 2 weeks.
delayed in
Maybe.
bringing it back to the next board meeting, but the one after, it might take one additional time.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yeah, is there any impact in delaying this a little bit so that we may seek input from the community if need be?
No, that's why we have this. We're bringing it now. We're not looking at implementing this until the 17-18 school year. So it's not something that's going to be implemented in the coming school year, so we do have some time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on then to our next agenda item, which is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
Yes, we have an action-packed superintendent's report tonight. Lots going on. And in the interest of time, I'm going to give some direction to the group that's presenting. But before I dive in, first thing I'd like to do is introduce Mr. Richard Schroeder, who will be starting formally as our Chief Academic Officer on May 15th. Richard, if you'd stand up and be recognized so the board knows who they're working with. Happy to have Richard join our team. He's finishing his current responsibility and is going to be able to get started. And I also want to echo the sentiments from the board. It's very personal for me. Dan Wiesman is somebody I've worked with for over 10 years and been a big part of what we've attempted to accomplish. And so, Dan, you're going to be greatly missed. And thank you so much for being a great part of our team. And I would echo what has been said, that Belvedere is going to be very fortunate to have you. And we're happy that you're going to still be part of the region, working together to improve things in the entire Rock River Valley. So well-deserved and happy for you, and it's certainly going to be a loss for our district. So thanks for everything, Dan. Finally, there are 3 things that are going to occur underneath the heading. One, a very high-level update of the goals and strategies. We're providing written copies today, so please feel free to share any perspective and send those to me electronically. I'll make sure that any comments that you have get back. The cabinet members that are presenting tonight are not going to read these line by line. They're going to pick up some high-level points, but this is a process that we're refining between now and the next quarterly meeting, so we want you to feel free to share those comments as we move forward. We'll hear our last set of those presentations at our next board meeting, but there are still going to be opportunities. Then we'll take one last look at everything at at the first board meeting in May. So I don't want you to, so you can certainly make comments tonight as you see fit, but I don't want you to think this is going to be your last opportunity to comment on these, and this will be a very high-level overview. And the Standard & Poor rating and the budget presentation, Standard & Poor will be very brief, sharing of some good news in terms of maintaining our credit rating. And the board, the FY17 budget is something we're going to, Ms. Talbert Scott has done a lot of great work on with a lot of support, and she will be presenting an extremely high-level overview. You're going to hear back on the board on the budget many times between now and the next 2 or 3 board meetings. So again, I don't want you to, particularly for our 2 board members, that this is your first time through the budget process. There will be much more detail to come. I want to make sure I prepare your expectations from that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our cabinet members that are going to be presenting our second of 3 series of presentations on our goals and strategies and how we're actualizing those around leading and lagging indicators and a calendar. So with that, Dan, are you going to be up first?
Yeah, so I'm going to pretend to be Earl. He's representing us at a state function. I'll just try to talk with a deeper voice.
Okay.
The Communications Department 5-year vision, I'll jump through quickly. It includes the 5-year vision under A is providing support to schools on customer service. B is communication with community groups. C is a multi-year marketing communication plan. D is improving communication processes. And E is parent satisfaction for new families in the new welcoming center in the floor below us. The lagging indicators include indicators on parent satisfaction, the 5 essential survey and the responses for that. That was A1 and A2. B1 is B1 and B2 are business and community perceptions. C1 are some social media metrics, and then E1 is the metrics on our Welcome Center. Recent accomplishments include Peach Jar implementation, which is an electronic backpack system, student-led tours, and the Welcome Center downstairs. The next page has leading indicators, which I won't go into right now, but you can go through. And then there's a calendar that goes through some of the items I just mentioned in a more detailed format. Because we are doing so much tonight, that's kind of what I'll leave it at, and then we could go through questions probably at a later point.
Okay, I've got the second section. It starts with the blue pages, and these are the vision and strategic steps we're taking in the principal leadership department. We call it school leadership team. And some of these are things we've talked about at other retreats, our previous retreat. And I don't want to read through this. It's a lot. There's 3 pages like Dan shared from Earl's department. I think you probably would be best served to review this on your own, and then at our next retreat, we maybe can do a deeper dive. But big picture here, we are in the business, we're in the people business. And so a lot of our goals are centered around principal leadership and quality of principal leadership. We know that the teacher is the #1 school controlled factor that impacts students, and the research says the principal is #2. However, the principal actually decides who to hire. So I think the work that we do with principals is critical to realizing our goals and our strategic plan. And you can see some of our targets where we're looking at more stability. I want to highlight that, the lagging indicator #2. We're looking to build on stability in the buildings. I think that's critical. We've had some turnover in recent years, and we have some survey data that we use. We also use some 5 essentials data to monitor what's happening. These are lag indicators. On the next page, you would see the lead indicators. And then the third page, you can look and see where we're at as far as implementation.
Next is Goal 4, relating to quality staff. There are 5 areas under the 5-year vision, A being increasing employee retention and satisfaction through creation and implementation of a teacher pathway district-wide. That is on our agenda yet this evening under new business, and I will go into more detail at that time. In addition, we're looking to also increase employee retention and satisfaction through an onboarding program for all employee work groups. In addition, performance ratings, looking at enhancing those with the implementation of a systematic staff development, pathways, as well as career ladders. Also, to develop a formalized system to promote employee leadership through succession management, and also to increase customer service within the Human Resources Department. Our Human Resources Department, in terms of tenure, most staff members are fairly new, so there is learning and development that is occurring. In addition to that, our lagging indicators relating A1 and B1, it's to increase employee retention, and again, that's through our teaching pathway. Also looking at measuring customer satisfaction through an employee annual customer HR survey. A3 also reviews the ethnic diversity of increasing our percentages as measured through a government report. Again, that's through the education pathway. Also looking to increase employee performance ratings by work groups as well. And lastly, looking at through the development of an internal climate survey that will have the information needed to move the HR department forward as it relates to customer service. On the tracking chart, a lot of the information that's there basically relates to the education pathway, which we will discuss later on in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you to all three. Again, let me clarify some things in terms of how you'll be able to provide feedback to us. Kelly Monson from our team is going to send out an email with digital PDF copies of all of these. You can send your feedback to Kelly and CC me on that email so that any feedback gets incorporated. I don't want you to have to wait until the quarterly. Please review these at your leisure. We'll keep incorporating it, and again, we'll keep presenting updated drafts moving forward. She will also send out, and this will be through Mrs. Fromm, she'll be sending that out. So you'll get that. We will also post these on board docs so the community can review as well. They're in draft form right now, and so there's still some work to do, and I'm really pleased with the work our team has done on this, but your feedback is going to be really valuable to us. And now I would like to turn it over to Stacy, and Stacy has some good news to share, and also will give a very high-level overview of the budget.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to stand here before you to share with you as a part of the bond issue process that the district is currently going through. We went through a credit rating process with Standard & Poor's, and I am proud to present on behalf of Martin McConaughey that the district was able to retain our AA- rating. And just to give you an idea of what that means on the scale, Standard & Poor's has a rating of AAA all the way down to default D and 14 places in between. And so we're ranked at number 4th place with the AA negative. So that is great news. And some of the comments that Standard & Poor's made is that our rating reflects strong financial performance and practices that include balanced budget and our ability to sustain reserve levels in line with our board's fund balance policy, as well as our stable outlook in our current and managerial financial practices and our ability to operate efficiently and effectively in tight times. This all comes even though one of the things that they also noted was that we have a very respectable score despite a heavy dependence on the state of Illinois funding that we get. So even in spite of that, we still were able to retain that, and that is absolutely great news. Okay, from there, I am going to move forward to giving you all, as Dr. Jarrett mentioned, an overview of our FY17 budget process. This is going to be a high-level overview just to share with everyone the process and where we're headed. Right now, administration is working through all of the compilation of the documents, the letter of transmittal to share with you exactly what the plan is in terms of how the district is going to be investing in our education and academics for our students in the 2016-17 school year. Okay. In terms of our FY17 budget, in the treasurer's report that is presented by Mrs. Bessinen on a quarterly basis, at this point she's forecasting approximately $5.8 million favorable variance in FY16. Now that's an important fact to know because that's going to be part of the plan of the budget plan that we're going to be presenting for FY17. And that actually is part of the FY16 surplus plan. And as you all may recall, is that the reason for this favorable variance is primarily due to the fact that we're actually receiving more general state aid than what we budgeted last year. We budgeted to receive 89% of the amount that was going to be available to us, and we got a nice surprise that it actually came in at 92%. And so that's in essence the $5 million additional that we are projecting that we will have ending this school year, our current school year. In terms of our budget development process, there were a number of different steps we took. One would be a multi-year financial forecast and assumptions from using PMA. So we did not look just at only 2016-17. We also extrapolated that out for 4 additional years so we can see what our impact would be for the next 4 years. As well as developing budget developmental goals and outcomes. You know, we have this wonderful strategic plan, and it was very interesting for me to see how a lot of the decisions that were made in terms of the funding were directly driven and tied to the strategic plan. And that'll be one of the biggest pieces that you all will see when we do the complete budget presentation. As well as some of the technology enhancements and changes to our budget process. So to go through some of the assumptions, and I'm going to say tonight we're going to primarily focus on the operating revenue when we bring, operating budget, but when we bring back the complete budget, it will have both operating and capital funds, so it'll be a complete presentation. We will be presenting a balanced budget, which is what you'll see here this evening. Our operating revenues, we're projecting at about $362.5 million. That's about 1.1% increase over our forecasted actuals for our current fiscal year. So where we're projecting we're going to end the current year. In terms of our different sources of revenue, we have our local property taxes, where that amount is going to remain flat. You know, per the board directive, we're not capturing any consumer price index on there. As well as our corporate personal property replacement tax. We have adjusted our budget to reflect our forecasted actuals. The State of Illinois Department of Revenue actually releases estimates, and those estimates get released after we adopt our budget. So our budget for our current year is actually trending about 2% higher, and that is reflected, as we say, adjusting our forecasted actuals for our CPPRT. In terms of our state and general state aid, we are projecting 92% proration, which is currently what we're getting this year. We are on track as of right now for receiving all of our payments, so we're going to keep hopeful there. As well as our categorical aid, we're projecting to receive 4 categorical payments in FY17. In terms of any of the other funding, we are projecting for that to remain flat, and we're also doing the true-up or reconciliation for any grants or additional funding that we may have received via the state. And I'll give an example of that. That would be for our CEP lunch program. You'll see those reflected in state and federal because we made the program to go away from having families pay for lunches and then they're all going to be paid for through the CEP. Those revenues are now captured in our state and federal within the budget. And in terms of federal, those levels, we're expecting that to mirror our FY16 levels, as well as, once again, adjusting our FY17 budget to ensure that we are capturing any grants that are new to addition to us, as well as any grants that are concluding this year and will not be carried over to our FY17 year. In terms of our operating expenditures, $362.5 million, 1.1% increase. As you can see, it matches our revenue stream. In terms of our salaries, we have contractual increases included within our budget. This also includes the 6 bargaining units that we are now going to be entering into negotiations with. So the board approved a certain dollar amount of percentage for administration to not exceed, and so those amounts are included into the budget, as well as I want to note that our staffing levels for this year have remained consistent. There were a number of positions that were added back, such as our building support specialists. Those were added back into the schools this year, and so those will also move forward and be carried forward to our FY17 year. In terms of our employee benefits, we're projecting a net 4% increase. with healthcare costs increasing approximately 6%. And then any of the pension costs and retirement costs have been adjusted according to any of the contractual salary increases. As well as this next item, in terms of FY17 purchases, there are $4.3 million worth of items that were requested within the FY17 budget that are, as you can see, more of supplies, materials types items that we want to, or we are recommending to use this current $5.8 million projected surplus for in FY16 to purchase these items. So those items have been removed from our FY17 budget, and we are proceeding to purchase those in FY16. So FY17 budget requests that we are accelerating or advance purchasing currently so that we can receive them by the end of this fiscal year that we're currently in and can be charged to this year. And that includes our 27 school buses, as well as all the other categories there. Okay, other areas, one of those will be our purchase services. The district is looking to invest quite a bit into professional development with all of the strategies surrounding our strategic plan and initiatives. This was one of the things that was big on the list to ensure that we are providing the correct professional development for those items. Supplies and materials, we have $1.8 million for math instructional resource adoption. That's our middle school math books. And for those that were here last year, this was one of the items that we actually did eliminate from our FY16 budget, that we knew that we were going to come back and ensure that that was funded in our FY17 budget. And so we are funding the middle school math, as well as an additional $400,000 in investments in textbooks for additional sections, expansions of programming, etc. In terms of our capital and equipment, we have a total of $2.9 million in investment in technology. That's both software upgrades as well as equipment and hardware and infrastructure needs. $1.3 million investment in furniture for the capital plan, the 27 school buses. There's about $2 million of deferred maintenance projects in the budget. And then any other capital or equipment we are projecting will have remained flat. And I see a question.
Mr. Connor.
You had sent the list, and thank you for the follow-up. And on the accelerated, one of the line items is under the information technology, and I think it calls out 1,000 desktops as part of that. Do you know, one of the things we had talked about at one point is the usage of desktops versus laptops. So I was slightly surprised to see that they were desktops, because I don't know why. I was thinking last time we had talked about more investment in the laptops.
We are spending less money this year than we have in the past refreshing desktops. I think we'll slowly phase out of that. It's going to be slower than I would probably like, but the transition will be easier for teachers. I think we're spending about $500,000 upgrading laptops. We're continuing to put more into the laptop side, and so it is more to the mobile side, and will continue to be more. But there are some desktop labs that we still have that are physical spaces set aside for that, and currently it is less expensive still for some of those fixed lab spaces.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, is the focus of the desktops is more on the lab side, because we had talked about the teachers having the two, and so we're really not replacing those old desktops by and large. It's really for the actual labs is the focus of the 1,000.
I don't know the ratio. We are replacing some teacher desktops still.
Okay, I think the only thing I'm not really complaining on this one. I think I just want to make sure that we're on the desktop side. judiciously going after it. That's why the labs make more sense. But, okay, thanks.
So as we combine and compile all of the assumptions and the information that's been presented to you, you will see in terms of the column that's highlighted in blue that we are going to present a balanced budget. And we're presenting a balanced budget. In terms of, this is a slide I was looking for, in terms of presenting balanced budget as well as where we're going to forecast our fund balance to be, one of the things we also wanted to make sure that we note would be that as we're ending our FY16 year, and this is even taking into account spending the additional $4.3 million that we are anticipating in surplus, that we will end our fund balance by being 30% of where we should be in terms of percentage of expenditures to fund balance. So we still will be in a very healthy place with our financial reserves in FY16 as well as FY17 in terms of where we're projected to end. Looking big picture wise at our revenue by source, the blue is our local funding, and so that's about 46% of our total revenue budget. And the green represents the state and the purple represents the federal. So you'll see that in terms of the whole $362.5 million, 46% of that is local, with 41% of that being from the state. In terms of expenditures, the blue and kind of the rose or pink colored, that's about $264 million. That's salary and benefits, and that's 73% of our total operating budget, with the green being purchase services, and that's 12%. Just to give you all more of a timeline, this exact presentation has been presented to the Budget and Finance Subcommittee as well as to the Operations Committee. On April 26th, the administration will be presenting to you the first reading of the FY17 budget and presentation. As always, we welcome questions and comments. There will be additional information that will be linking this financial plan of what we're recommending next year to our actual strategic plan and the things that the district plans to accomplish as a whole. We have placeholders for every board meeting. I didn't put that up here, but placeholders for every board meeting for the board to continue to discuss and ask questions in terms of the budget, with the public hearing being on June 14th and the final budget adoption being on June 28th. Are there any questions?
Mr. Rollins.
Some comments. Actually, I do still have a couple of questions. I made a comment at the Operations Committee meeting. I'll just repeat it here. I don't want to mean to say that we're doing anything wrong, because we're not. I mean, we're doing what we need to do. It's just kind of a cautionary note, I think, for the board, which is we're saying we're doing a balanced budget for fiscal year 17, but we're getting to the balanced budget for fiscal year 17 by pulling $4.3 million of expenditures that we really need to do into our fiscal year 16 budget. So, when we start working on the fiscal year 18 budget, which isn't all that far away, we're starting with a $4.3 million hole, plus whatever additional increases in expenses that we're going to have. So that's something to think about. The other cautionary note that I just sounded or concern that I raised is, we've talked about this for a couple of years now, about what our actual hardware needs are. And, I know this is a little bit in flux with Dr. Wiesman bailing on us.
It's not a great term.
Okay.
But when we get some really high-quality person in place to replace Dr. Wiesman, I really do think this is a conversation we need to have. We need to get that analysis done, and we need to figure out what our needs actually are so that we can start appropriately budgeting for them. Did you have a question or comment?
Do you want me to respond to that, or?
About the really high-quality person we're going to hire to replace you? If you have something to add, that's fine.
Yeah, one thing, because we will be in the process of transitioning, I think it'd be important for Dr. Wiesman to talk a little bit about the direction in terms of what that actual target is, which is somewhat of a moving target. And there have been a lot of numbers thrown out, some as high as, $7 million for an annual refresh cycle and things like that. And I think while we're waiting for a full-time replacement, it'd be great, Dr. Weisman, if you'd kind of share where you're at in terms of some of the analysis we've done.
So I was the one that brought up years ago the $7 million amount. It was to be able to bring ourselves up to, with all the devices that we had, be within life cycle with all the devices that we had. I think I talked about that for 2 years, and I think everybody wanted to support that. Just the amount of money that was we're able to, for a few years now, we've been able to increase the amount during that period that we did spend on tech and really focused on refresh, and the IT audit gave us the priority of putting money into the refresh and supporting that. One of the things I learned over that 2 years trying to get more money to refresh everything and talking to other districts and seeing what they did was really looking at the ratio of total IT spend to budget. And norming my department against that, it became more clear that it was unrealistic for me to ask for $7 million, and maybe the way that we were going about discussing technology refreshes wasn't the best practice, wouldn't be to refresh every device we had. And so the last 2 years, really what we've done, and I think the strategic plan supports this, is really said, absent a curriculum that has an aligned technology component to it, right now our extra efforts that we would put into technology spend are important, but are going to give us less of an ROI than if we had curriculum programs that were aligned with technology. And so I think one of the things you're going to see that's going to be good, and the curriculum department is excited about, and I think our new chief academic officer is excited about, is transitioning the technology department as I leave to be part of the curriculum team. And some of the discussions that have been able to be happening already around that, assuming that's going to happen, have been good. And so I think that we are going to have to talk about technology purchases and moving money into technology as part of that plan, but that's going to need to include what do we give up in curriculum, because there are some things we can do and have started moving towards. Mr. Connor brought up some of them, to transition and change the way we do purchases, so we're purchasing the things that we actually need, and we'll find some extra ways to spend money wiser that way. But then also making sure that the money we actually spend aligns to the curriculum will get us more ROI. The last couple of years also, so what you don't see as part of this budget, and every year what we don't see is schools have been utilizing their discretionary funds to purchase technology. So while not all the district refreshes happen through the district in the budget that I get, that you see up here, they use some of their discretionary funds that they get from different sources to do that for primary and then supplemental instructional purposes. And so some of those decisions around technology currently are able to be made at the school level, and the school level teams are able to decide how to use that. So I don't think we're where we need to be with technology spend, but I think that given where we're at, we really need to continue to work on making sure that the curriculum work brings in the technology component so we're spending the right money. I don't know if that answers any of your concerns, but it's my soapbox for the last meeting. So
it's a good discussion, and I guess it sort of just confirms that we need to continue to have that discussion and probably come to some resolution. And we do have a couple of newer people on the school board. I mean, when I first got on the school board, one of the things that the staff were screaming about the most is that the technology didn't work. And I made the comment on the floor once upon a time that we can't expect our teachers to be, technology gurus. And if we want them to use technology in education, it has to be like a utility. It has to be like turning on the lights. So we spent a lot of money bringing in a consultant to help us figure out why it wasn't working. And increasing the refresh cycle was one of the recommendations of that consultant. I understand everything that you're saying, and that all needs to be done. We've made tremendous progress, by the way. And by the way, I don't think Dr. Jarrett believed me when I started telling him about how bad things were until he started going out to the buildings. And every meeting he had with faculty was their number one concern was that the technology didn't work. I just don't want to see us go backwards. So we've sort of potentially, lightened this in the budget for now 2 years in a row. I really think we need to get on this and figure out what our needs really are and make sure we meet those needs. I had two questions, one sort of general, one really technical. I'll ask the technical first. I didn't notice this at the Operations Committee, but we're projecting $700,000 less in local revenue next year than our current fiscal year. Why is that?
That has to do with the CEP program and those parents and families that no longer have to purchase don't have to purchase any lunches. So that revenue we don't have in the local revenue, but it's showing up in either the state or federal.
Oh, okay. We were getting $700,000 in lunch fees?
We were getting about $1 million, actually.
Really? Okay. And then just a general question. You did say that we've budgeted for what we expect to spend through our contract negotiations. We are going through some ongoing negotiations with the REA through the IBB process on a variety of topics. Do we have placeholders in the fiscal year 17 budget for whatever might be coming out of those ongoing discussions, those current discussions?
There is additional monies in there for differentials and stipends. And I know that there is a differential and stipend committee of what they're trying to work through those details. But so I know specifically that there is monies in there for that, as well as some in terms of the strategic planning for all the different committee work that's happening there with the academic team and the teachers and that.
Okay, like some of the other things like we were discussing earlier tonight, are we making sure we reserve in case we get to a resolution on some of those things? No? Yes?
I think that there are a couple things. One would be some things that we'd be talking about would be very much designated from a reserve perspective, depending on what you're talking about. And obviously, we have to be somewhat cryptic because these are ongoing bargaining and legal issues. The other thing I think we have to be aware of is that there are we're really up in the air in terms of what our overall funding will look like. And part of what we have to acknowledge as we go into FY17, there's some good news and there's some bad news. If you read, we had two dueling proposals that came out today, one from Senator Bernard, which would be a windfall for the district. I haven't read the most recent projections, but the last time around, that was something like an $11 million swing for general state aid for the district. I don't think it'll be that much this year. There's a more equitable approach in terms of it softens the blow and there's some hold harmless. I'll get that to the board as soon as I get the details on it and have a chance to review it. But even the governor's proposal today, which just fully funds general state aid, would move $4.8 additional $1 million into the, but we also don't even have a budget right now for FY16. So we have to be incredibly cautious as well. So, we don't have every single contingency that could possibly come into play baked in, and we are really looking at budgeting as a 2-year journey here because we got some unexpected funding, and that covers us going into FY17 because of the uncertainty that surrounds us. That's why we're taking that kind of multi-year approach. And the reality is, Mr. Rollins, there is a tiny bit of flexibility baked into this budget, but the reality is we are really going to be looking at larger issues, which is at some point there needs to be some kind of direction on a budget. That's an even greater concern to me than the dollars that you were talking about. I think Mrs. Talbert Scott does have new information about the number of retirees and some additional things that are based into the budget that are coming in better than expected. That gives us a little additional flexibility that could cover some of those costs. But the reality is none of that's going to matter in a big way until we know for sure what the general state aid formula is going to be. That's the one real variable that's going to move the needle dramatically for us moving forward beyond any of these smaller assumptions. And we're being, I think, pretty responsible and pretty cautious, setting it at 92% proration, considering the public scenarios out there are significantly better than that. But I think it tempers the optimism a little considerably when you consider that the state is currently operating without enough revenue to pay for that. So,
So I understand the timing of this accelerated purchase. I mean, that is not part of our quote-unquote vote on the budget. This is just something that is just going to be brought to us piece by piece as, for example, there's a bid on the buses that we approve, or so we're not making a statement as a board that we want to spend our surplus instead of putting it into reserves. We're just going to let that happen, and maybe that's just how we always do it, right? The other piece is the 400,000. I just asked the 400,000 for additional textbooks. It says expansion of programs. Do you know what programs are we expanding that we needed more?
That detail of information I do not have available with me tonight, but that will be available when I return in 2 weeks for the full budget presentation.
Okay. Just to give you the high level, instead we typically budget, I think it's around $1.8 million a year for general textbook purchases. I think that was something we honored during the budget process at the staff level to add about another 400,000 into that line item. So that's reflected, and as Mrs. Talbert Scott pointed out, I believe we will have additional specifics about why that request made it in so that the board can have that information as we get into the technical details of the budget with you. Again, one thing I want to remind the board, based on your feedback and our desires as an administrative team, this board budgeting process will look very different next year. This year is still reflective of kind of our past practice where there is significant board input at kind of the fourth quarter, kind of the end of the road, so to speak. With the board's new budget and finance committee that, well, it's not, we've always had a budget and finance subcommittee, but now the newly formed committee level structure, you will be engaged in this work side by side with the administration starting in the first quarter of next year. So it'll be an increasingly collaborative process, and I think that will, I'm excited to see how different that process looks moving forward. I think that's going to be a really good change moving forward, because I think that was really good feedback we got from the board that sometimes getting involved in the fourth quarter, there isn't enough opportunity for the board to make the kind of changes you'd like to see because so much of the proverbial die is cast at that point. So, but I do want to commend Ms. Talbert Scott and the team for this first overview of this. I think we're off to a really good start in the process this year, and looking forward to a series of robust dialogues and debates about how to finalize this budget in the next 3 to 4 meetings prior to the June meeting where we have to approve it.
And so I heard you saying a little bit earlier, the big question mark about what the state is going to provide, and that's the reason I asked the question about spending on the entire surplus we have from this year. If we're pretty confident we're going to get the 92%. I mean, we weren't last year, and then we got it, but if we don't, and the other thing is when you say on the retirees, we're up to 64 certified, wasn't it? What was it that we were anticipating when you were doing your budget preparation?
40.
40, so like 50.
So some of that, that's
Sure.
where you get some flexibility.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And then this year, when we seemed like we weren't going to have enough money, one of the things was that this year, it all kind of blends, forgive me, that we took 10% of each of the building budgets away. Did we give that money back to the buildings, or did we leave them flat?
So with the elementary schools, we did restore the elementary school level funding. In terms of middle school, and I'm just going to put it this way, the percentage of funding that was cut last year for this year's budget was 20%. So the elementary schools got all of their funding restored in the FY17 budget. The middle schools went down a bit to 15% reduction, and then the high schools, theirs remained flat in terms of still seeing the 20% reduction. And the reason being is that the high schools and middle schools get a lot more title funding and a lot more funding in general than the elementary schools. So we wanted to ensure that we made the elementary schools whole and without hurting any of the middle or high schools.
We have some programs that don't get as much title money, don't we, as some of our choice programs? So, middle school, well, we can talk. You mentioned that we're, part of the reduction in the local was the amount of money that we're getting from food, but
Correct.
I think it's important that you iterate that we're still ahead because of the money we're getting from the federal government, right?
Correct.
So could you just comment on that?
Mhm. So, I'll go back. If you look at our local revenue, it is down about 701,000, what we're projecting. But part of the increase in the state, as well as part of the increase in the federal, you'll see in the state it's 1.4 million increase, and then in the federal is 2.9 million increase. There's a little bit over $1 million baked into those numbers for the additional funding that's coming from the state and the federal government for our CEP food program. So, absolutely.
Yeah, I just didn't want us to think that we were. And then I know that Mr. Rollins asked about this at Ops Committee, but we have talked about additional investments in our focus schools. And so if there can be, any conversation about what we're doing with those focus schools to make sure that we're demonstrating that additional investment, is that changing? Is that flat for next year? What is?
Well, absolutely. That is some of the information that I am gathering to develop so that the board can see what additional resources or resources in general are being invested in some of those schools that you mentioned.
Thank you.
Mr. Connor?
Just a quick reminder, we talked at Ops about the scenario management essentially. So I think I don't know if it's too late for this time, but certainly for next time, just for everybody, we talked about baking in 2 or 3 major assumptions at the highest levels just to see what the impact is. So just as a reminder, I think that would be helpful.
And as to what Dr. Jarrett talked about earlier, actually from the standpoint of finance, that is something that we did. We, as I mentioned, work closely with PMA and actually have access to use their software, which I'm really excited about because you would not believe how many scenarios I have out there. But so it'll be really exciting when we have our finance committee, because then those will be the things that, the board members will see that are not necessarily seen here at the full board as a whole meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Stacy. Any other things for your report? Okay.
I think that was the longest superintendent's report on record.
Okay.
I think we will rest at this point.
All right.
My apologies, we had a lot to cover tonight.
Okay. Ms. McCulloch, the Education Committee report.
Education Committee has not met since our last board meeting, but we do have a meeting scheduled for next Tuesday in this room at 5:30, and that's April 19th. We'll be going over the discipline code and then doing an update on middle school teaming program, whatever, middle school model. Thank you. And so we will meet next week.
Mr. Rollins, the Operations Committee report.
Operations Committee met in this room on April 5th at 5:30 p.m. This is going to be a short report because virtually everything we talked about is on the agenda tonight.
Okay.
We talked about the secondary attendance zones. Hey, let's discuss that again. We discussed the fiscal year 17 annual budget presentation. We discussed a resolution authorizing eminent domain, which I believe is under new business tonight. I'll let Mr. Schmidt talk about that when the time comes. And then Mr. Balin gave sort of an update, a broad update on the new elementary school design. The district is working with the architect for the 2 new elementary schools. There's an executive committee that's been established, that's met a few times, that has established some, I don't know what to call them, design values, maybe not really principles, maybe values. They're working with the REA's president and vice president are on that executive committee. They're working to try to get staff input on the teacher designs, long night, on the elementary school designs, and they're also looking to try to set up some site visits of some schools that have been recently been built. And that was the Operations Committee. We will be meeting again on Tuesday, May 3rd at 5:30 PM in this room.
We'll move on to our action items tonight. Our first action item is the Erickson Institute Fussy Baby Network Advanced Training and Evaluation Project, which Kimberly Nelson presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this project?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Escobedo. Any questions or discussion?
Just the name alone
Fussy
is
Baby.
worthwhile.
Okay.
I mean, we have to pass it,
Okay.
if nothing else, just for the name.
All right. Any other comments? All right. We'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of this training and evaluation project.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins.
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next action item is the approval of the InTouch software agreement. Tamika Stewart-Jones presented that last meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve this agreement?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Nope. Okay. Have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the InTouch software agreement.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins.
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano.
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we'll move on to other and new business agenda recommendations. The first item will be Curriculum Associates Web-Based Services and Professional Development for Summer Camp. Dr. Wolf.
Thank you. We are asking the board to approve a contract with Curriculum Associates to give us the instructional tools we need to support the 1,800 students that will come to summer camp in the program that you approved in January. And the total cost includes both professional development and the licenses. It totals $44,400, is covered by Title I services, and students would actually maintain access to those licenses through the end of the summer.
Any questions for Dr. Wolf? Thank you. This will be presented at our April 26th board meeting for a vote. Our next item is, boy, it's a long one, is the resolution providing for the issue of approximately $29,100,000 taxable general obligation school bonds, alternate revenue source, Series 2016, for the purpose of improving the sites of building and equipment additions to and altering, repairing, and equipping school buildings and facilities in and for the district. I think Mrs. Holdley might have wrote this. No, okay. Okay. Providing for the levy of a direct annual tax sufficient to pay the principal interest on said bonds and authorizing the execution of a bond purchase agreement with Stifel, Nicholas and Company, Incorporated, in connection with the sale of said bonds. Wow. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
Good evening.
Thank you for being
can,
here.
You can blame the lawyers for that,
Okay.
but not Mrs. Hoadley. The lawyers in Chicago get responsibility for that. Good evening. I'm Ann Noble from Stifel. I will be very brief because you all have had quite a night already. We have amended the resolution that you had previously heard on first reading. So tonight, we really just want to update you on what the amendment is and why. And then we'll have before you at your next meeting formal approval. So what this all relates to is the $29 million of qualified school construction bonds, which the school district was lucky enough to receive an allocation of from the state. And for those new board members, the qualified school construction bonds are a federal bond program that was actually initiated through the America Reinvestment Act way back in 2009, and Illinois is just getting around to making their allocation. So we're happy that you're able to take advantage of that, because what it does is essentially provide for very close to interest-free borrowing. So we've been working away on this $29 million borrowing. You've completed your public hearing. Your petition period was posted. We did get the credit rating updated, as Ms. Talbert Scott reported to you, and I can't emphasize enough how important your budget and your financial stability is tied to that credit rating. And everything that you all are doing to keep your financial house in order is very much about that AA- rating. And that every time you go to the market, that does buy you lower interest rates. So you are to be commended in spite of, as S&P said, in spite of the state of Illinois, you are keeping your financial house in order. So that process has been completed. At this point, we're very close to being ready to sell the bonds. What we want to do is add one additional provision to this bond issue, which would allow what we call an invested sinking fund. So if you think about this in terms of as an individual retail shopper, if you have an opportunity to buy something interest-free and pay it back, let's say a year down the road, interest-free, but you have the money on hand today, you take advantage of that interest-free borrowing, and then you take the money that you have on hand today and you invest it. And then at the end of the interest-free period, you have not only the original amount that you were going to use for the purchase on hand, but you have the interest income that you've made during that period. What we're proposing that you would do here is essentially exactly that. You're scheduled to make about $2.5 million a year of bond payments from your CPPRT revenue to pay off the $29 million of bonds. We're going to leave those payments in place, so you're still going to be paying down about $2.5 million a year. But you're not going to pay the bond investors $2.5 million a year. Instead, you're going to take $2.5 million a year and invest it in an invested sinking fund. It'll go into Treasury securities with a bank trustee. And at the end of the time period, the earnings that you've earned will be offset against the $29 million of principal. The earnings are not guaranteed, because literally each year when you make your annual payment, it'll be invested at whatever rate is available at that time. Based on the current average life of the bonds, we estimate if rates were where they are today, that you would earn about 1.3%. So that's a very conservative estimate. That would net you about $1.8 million of interest income, which you can offset against your last couple of bond payments, essentially. So all it is a plan to add investment income to your payback structure, which in the end will provide you extra project dollars. So that's the amendment that's been made to the resolution, and will be officially approved in 2 weeks. And at that time, we will have the bonds actually sold. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
What would you say would be the risks associated with doing that?
We don't know what the rate of return will be, but we're not banking on a rate of return either, because you're still going to make your $2.5 million annual payment, and then we're just going to use it at the end to offset your final payments. So I really feel like the way this is set up, you're fairly neutral to how this comes out. Any dollar you earn is a positive. So
Investment gain could be lower than projected, I guess.
absolutely, could be twice as high. The lawyers are making us run it at the maximum permitted yield, which is almost $4 million of interest income. So
Mr. Rollins?
Will there be trustee fees involved?
there will be fees involved with the Bank of New York, who is your current bank trustee, and I am waiting to hear back a quote from them, so I don't have those yet.
Mr. Connor?
And just to be clear, on the risk side, that we're really limited in what we can actually invest in. So that's
Very.
one of the reasons
Yes.
why the risk is fairly low, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, you
So-
literally can only invest in one product.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
that's what I thought. I couldn't remember if it was just one, but, so, and also I want to thank you for saying so late. This is probably the, maybe the longest on record somebody's had to wait just to get 5 minutes worth of, yeah, we should have moved you up too,
Oh,
but thank you very much
It's quite all
for
right.
staying. Yeah.
You have a lot of heavy topics tonight, I know.
Any other questions for Ann? Thank you, Ann, and this will come up for our vote on April 26th.
I will not be able to be here in 2 weeks, but we will have everything queued up and ready for you to go at that time, and I expect nothing but a great result for you. So
Thank you.
congratulations in advance.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Schmidt, the resolution for authorization of eminent domain.
Yes, as part of the $250 million capital plan, we have land acquisition for Lincoln Middle School. We're in the process of doing that land acquisition, but there's one property where we're just about ready to acquire it, but the individual that owns that has deeded that property over to the mortgage company. Mortgage company has not recorded that title because there is over 17 liens on that property. So for us to acquire that property and have a clean title, we need to go through the eminent domain process.
Any questions for Mr. Schmidt? Okay, this will come up for a vote then on our April 26th board meeting, and Mrs. Lumpkin, you are next.
Before Mrs. Lumpkin gets started,
Okay.
I just want to take a moment to thank her and her team for what has been, this has been a long, long journey to bring this for first reading today, and Ms. Lumpkin and her team have worked really hard. A lot of great ideas have come from our Diversity Council, so I want to thank Ms. Jackson and Mr. Rollins for their representation from the board perspective on the committee, and a lot of great ideas have originated, and excited to share this very unique partnership with Rockford University. Hopeful, obviously at 9:30 at night, I don't know how much the word is going to get out on this really exciting partnership, but we're certainly going to be excited not only to tell the board about it, but to share this with the community via some other communication mechanisms. But I think this is a really positive step in the right direction as we look to create a teaching force that reflects the diversity of our community. And I think this could be a powerful tactic to help us do that in the long run. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Lumpkin to share the specifics. One thing I want to stress before she presents the specifics, this is not meant to be at this point a fully, this is about setting not to exceed dollar amounts for the budget. There's still a great deal of work to be done in terms of developing the specifics of the coursework at Rockford University and a number of the other specifics, but I think you will see that this will give us the flexibility we need to move forward in earnest and live up to this really powerful commitment that Rockford University has made to the students of our community, and that I hope the district will make as well. So with that, Mrs. Lumpkin.
As Dr. Jarrett had indicated, the proposed initiative, it includes 4 phases. The first phase is for middle school. And at middle school, the proposal is to work with our students in grade levels 7th and 8th grade to develop their interest in the field of education, building a capacity of about 80 to 100 students district-wide per grade level. Phase 2 is at the high school level. And at the high school level, this is where the creation of a 3-year teaching pathway will take place, beginning with 1 course per year per high school in grades 10, 11, and 12 for 80 to 100 students that would be developed in conjunction with RPS, our career academies. In addition to that, the proposal includes the cooperation with Rockford University and, of course, RPS, that we would provide professional development experiences in the district. In addition to that, the proposal would include other items such as stipends and summer jobs. Also, there would be a creation of a new capstone course for our high school seniors during their senior year. That again would be, our proposal is to include a joint development with Rockford University. Phase 3 includes the university level. So once our students who have gone through the program in high school will enter into a partnership with RU that provides a 4-year teaching degree for a target population for about 20 students per year. In addition to that, included would be professional development opportunities, along with continued observation hours in the school with RU. Summer opportunities would also be included, as well as working with RU's placement center to offer teaching assignments within Rockford Public Schools. On average, and we've talked a little bit about this, Mrs. Talbert Scott included that for retirees, on average, we include about 40 openings for retirees, retirements per year. So we're looking at, on average, of about 50 retirees per year. And that, we looked at that figure and we're projecting for that figure to remain pretty steady. As a result of that, those students who are going through the program at Rockford University, and once they graduate, we have an opportunity to bring them back, offer them jobs in the Rockford Public School District. And these are our students that we're hoping that started as early as middle school and have continued through the education pathway through their senior year of high school, and in addition to that, they've completed the 4-year bachelor's program at Rockford University. Phase 4 of the program, we're also proposing a master's program, and that's working in conjunction with Rockford University on the curriculum. That would also include 36 hours for a program that focuses on urban education. This program that we're proposing would also include a free master's program. And again, there would be criteria that would be involved for those individuals that would be accepted into the program. But we're also looking at 20 students per cohort in the program per year. With that said, the costs or the funding for the school year of 2016 to 2017 is about $200,000, which includes the cost, as it's documented in your proposal, for the senior seminar capstone course, as well as the graduate program and the upstart in our marketing cost. The program for the school year of 2017 to 2018, the funding cost does increase, given that we would be offering the senior seminar capstone course twice that year, and that would increase some of the cost, as well as within the graduate program that we're recommending that we start spring of 2017 will be in full swing, and that cost would increase considerably to about $288,000. We're looking at, if all goes well, that our first graduating class of the master's program would be in the fall of 2018. We think it's an opportunity for us to, again, educate our own students in the field of education. It's very difficult currently to recruit for some of our specialized or our hard-to-fill areas that include special ed, bilingual, as well as our sciences. In addition to that, as we go out and we recruit, we are also recruiting and competing with our surrounding school districts as well for the same talent. So the proposal that you have in front of you actually gives us an opportunity to introduce our own students who are in the district at a very early age to the field of education, and hopefully they will come back and teach within the district.
Mr. Rollins.
No, not questions, but I guess I want to give a little more context. This is an interesting proposal that the administration brought forward, but out of some long-term discussions that we've been having. Mrs. Jackson and I participated in a diversity council that was set up by the administration to talk about some of the issues. We get criticized on a fairly regular basis about the fact that our teaching staff doesn't look like our students. And the simple answer to that is that the applicant pool doesn't look like our students. We hire people who have college degrees in education, and minorities disproportionately do not go into education when they go to college. I mean, minorities disproportionately are not going to college in this country and in this community, and they're disproportionately even more not going into education when they do go to college. So one of the ideas that the administration has come up with is to partner with local institutions like Rockford University, and there may be other opportunities as well, to create, and this phrase gets used in other contexts, but I'm just going to use it for this purposes, it's sort of a grow your own program, that if we can get our own students interested in education and get them excited about education and get them involved in education at a fairly early age, that we will have an opportunity hopefully to create our own applicant pool of people who will maybe look more like our students and also provide job opportunities for local people. At a higher level, I mean, I'm being told that this isn't just an issue with minority students, but that we're going to have a shortage of teachers across the board. Fewer and fewer people are going into education. Our current workforce looks like a double bell curve. We do have a fairly large number of teachers who are fairly senior, and we will be looking to replace those teachers certainly, I would think, within the next 10 to 15 years. So these are the sorts of conversations that we have to have. I don't think that this is the only effort that we should be making, and we are continuing to make other efforts, more short-term efforts. But in the medium to long term, this may be our best chance of making some progress on what is a difficult and complex issue. One question that I had that I don't think is really fleshed out here. So if we expend these funds for students, are we asking them in some way to make a commitment back to the district for some period of time?
Yes, we would be. Again, we've not finalized all the details, but looking for a commitment of 3 to 4 years.
Okay, thanks.
I think baked into that commitment is going to be a minimum of 2 years, because the graduate program would start the spring on the first year of being hired and would continue on through the entire next year. So to take advantage of the benefit itself, that gets us 2 years in, and so we were thinking about extending it up to 4. But we're certainly open to the board's feedback in terms of where we should set that. We want to have strong incentives to enter the program. We want to make sure the board gets a good return on investment. But we also think we've dramatically enhanced the likelihood that people in this program will stay in our district, because we have been working with them from the time they were, if this is fully operational, from 6th, 7th grade on. And so these are students and potential employees that I think are more likely to stay because they have deep roots in the community, and if they're eligible for this program, they've never left the community because they're continuing to do their undergraduate education in the community while still working or taking part in professional development in our school system. And I think it's a pretty powerful value proposition that we're potentially putting on the table here, that a $30,000 a year college education at Rockford University is going to be available to our students for $5,000 a year. It's really, the idea originated really out of the idea of a location, how we could kind of capture some of the excitement that we've been trying to work on, and Mr. Vosberg's been spearheading on location-based scholarships. This is in essence a location-based scholarship for RPS students who are willing to go into education. We're talking about $20,000 commitment financially, with lots of opportunities to earn that back with work-study programs and working in our district, and a master's degree paid for. It's a pretty powerful incentive, I think, for people to go into education, to stay right here and be part of our team. And we think we're very fortunate to have a great partner like Rockford University that sees the value in investing in our students.
Ms. McCulloch?
Two questions. So at this point, the proposal that's being presented to us in the administrative recommendation is just for this next year, the first year, right? The 200,000, that's what's coming back to us in 2 weeks?
Yes.
So, and then instead of funding the entire program, we're just going to talk about it on an annual basis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then,
Let me interject. But I do think it's important that this is the kind of program where by funding it 1 year, I think we have to really be serious about saying that this is a 10-year, 15-year commitment, and if we're going to defund this program at some point, my recommendation would be that we'd essentially have to give multi-year notice. So the board should not enter into this commitment lightly, because the worst thing we could do with a program like this is say, oh, sorry, I know you're in year 2 of the program, but we can no longer support this anymore. I think we need to send a clear, yes, we're in year 1 is probably the time where we have the most flexibility to make adjustments and things like that. But once we dive into this, from my perspective, this needs to be an immovable priority in our budget, because we cannot send a mixed message. This will not be effective in recruiting students if there's the possibility that in a budget downswing it goes, which is why we made pretty great efforts to try to keep it to a budget level that we think is sustainable at around $400,000 per year once it's fully scaled up.
I guess that's why I'm asking the question.
No,
If we're
it's
just
great.
going to vote on
Great
1
question.
year, I mean, are we committing to it or are we not committing to it? So I don't know if we want to have further discussion on that. My second question is, I'm reading through this, and I just heard Mr. Rollins talk about the whole diversity piece and the fact that we want to recruit students who are reflective of the population that we have, but there's nothing in here that says that you have to have certain.
Correct.
I mean, it's open to anybody, right?
Right. You can't legally say, well, this is only for students of a certain racial or gender. But what we think can work here is in our marketing and the way we direct this program, we start with a resource, which is a great strength of our district, which is an incredibly diverse student population. So by starting with our RPS students, we are starting with a talent pool that reflects the diversity of our community. It is our community. And so that is how we think we will be able to achieve that outcome. That will not come simply by announcing this program and hoping people show up. That's why we are going to have to be very intentional with marketing, potentially supporting this program and nurturing these relationships with students so that students who are not traditionally right now as excited about going into teaching become excited about going into teaching in Rockford. We've had some great conversations with the REA about ways they can be a partner in helping to build that enthusiasm and that momentum. I think community advocacy and mentors and getting the word out is going to be really important. So while we can't legally say this program is only for certain gender or racial groups, we can certainly create a program that targets a student population that reflects the diversity we're hoping to obtain in our in our teaching population in the future.
Ms. Jackson.
So when will the, I guess, eligibility criteria, will we have that prior to voting? There's going to be some entrance criteria for the program, correct? Whether it's GPA, whatever it is. Will you guys have that by the next board meeting?
We can, if that is the request, when we brought the proposal forward, we were putting together just the framework. There are a lot of details that we still need to work through in terms of what those summer programs will look like, the criteria, who will, when will we start, how will we start with the middle schools, what those programs will look like. So there's a lot of details that will need to be finalized. But if there is some additional information that the board is recommending, we can certainly have some additional information for you at the next board meeting.
I think that's an excellent question. One thing that was kind of assumed, and we should have been more explicit about, Mrs. Jackson, is that a key component of this program is admission to Rockford University. So Rockford University's admission requirements will be the primary criteria because a student would have to be accepted into that program. Rockford University does an outstanding job of attracting a diverse student population, and I think they have both a mindset that is going to be very supportive for our students and and entrance requirements that I think will certainly, with a lot of hard work, be accessible to our students. So that I can tell you tonight that is going to be one key piece of the program, is students will have to be able to get into Rockford University.
And I'm just thinking as far as marketing, if we're going to market this,
Absolutely.
we need to know that information. Okay. So you guys will develop a timeline and then keep the board updated, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Rollins, you had a question?
No, go ahead.
I just had another comment, which was, and I've already made this comment to the administration. So one of my concerns is that this is an initiative that's really coming out of HR, but if this is going to be successful, it's going to be successful on the academic side of it, because we really are going to have to, as administration and as a board and as a district, do a good job of identifying kids who we think will be successful in this program, supporting them along the way, making sure we give them adequate support. And that all sort of falls on the administrative side, and sometimes we are a little siloed. So I've already expressed this comment privately. I'll express it publicly. For this to succeed, I hope we break through those silos, and we need to make sure we've got people overseeing this on the academic side who will really take ownership of this program and make it successful.
Mr. Connor?
Number one, I strongly support this idea. I think it's a great idea. And as always, devil's in the detail, but I think, as has been pointed out, I think the goals are truly what we need. And number one, it will help us to recruit talent, and it will support the teaching profession, which we absolutely have to do, especially as been repeatedly pointed out that those numbers are going down. So it's a very proactive move, and I think there's a benefit that once we get this, and I'm optimistic, we're going to do this and we're going to do it well, and that message is going to get out, and we're going to start over and above that recruiting people to the district. I think once they see our investments, then I think people will see why it's worthwhile to be here. So I think that's going to be a result. I think the other thing that I have to point out is we're taking a lot of steps towards our part of making the community better. And again, I'm going to give Mr. Rollins a ton of credit for the idea to encourage home ownership within Rockford. Again, it was despite some critics that I think were way off base, I think that was a great idea. And so again, we were proactive there. We've been proactive in watching the line on taxes. We've been proactive in the relationships with the union and the teachers. And I think this is now a next step that I see where we are not waiting for things to happen. We're going out and being proactive. So I really give a ton of credit to the administration, particularly not just HR, but the entire educational planning behind this. This is truly well done. And from my point of view, this should be, as Mr. Rollins said, something that goes across all areas. But I think this, again, comes back to the marketing of us as a brand. I really do. I think that these actions, when seen only on their own, can get lost sometimes. So there's an entire big picture here, so I give Mrs. Lumpkin, this is really great work, so really appreciate it. Look forward to this becoming reality.
I think Dawn's back there. Dawn, would you like a minute to comment on this program? It's important for me as a board member to hear.
Just making sure you're still awake.
Dawn and Paul, you can do a tag team if you want, but it's important for me as a board member to hear from our REA leadership on this topic.
So we have been working on this issue with the district for probably the last year. And we know that our teaching force does not mirror our students, and that we understand the need for teaching is a tough business, and it's something that we know that if we can start the relationships with 7th and 8th graders and follow that relationship through the high schools and keep them here in our town, we have a better chance of keeping teachers and making them want to stay in Rockford. And I have an example. We have a early childhood teacher who went through Auburn CAPA program, is now a very excited early childhood teacher. And he is here because he lived in Rockford. He came back from school and is here. So I think if we can keep them here and we can keep them in Rockford, we have a really good chance of changing the workforce. I'll let Paul answer.
So I can hardly think of anything that would be more exciting as an educator than seeing someone that you have taught and mentored come up to join the profession in your own institution. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. And so this opportunity is really thrilling, I think, for me as an educator in the district. And we've been working on the issue. It's longer than a year. I know the district has really been working on the issue. The Diversity Council's been working on the issue and has made a lot of attempts, whether that's going to historically black colleges, whether it's going to recruiting fairs all over the country and sending recruiters all over the country. And what we found is Rockford is its own particular kind of place with its own flavor. And if we're going to be successful, we really need our own people who love Rockford for what it is. And those are the people who are going to stay. So this is, for me, this could hardly be more exciting. This is the way to do it right. And we look forward to it, engaging in it, participating at the middle school and the high school level with support. We're looking into after-school clubs that are future teacher clubs, but we have the opportunities with our high schools and the academies to make it more than just a club. And with the support Dr. Jarrett's talking about and the opportunities for kids to really get involved and be supported all the way through, we really think we could be a leading institution in this.
Thank you. Okay, this will come up for us for a vote. Oh, Ms. Jackson, you had another question?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn.
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 9:54. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Nothing you can do about that
okay,
one.
no.
That'd be a long one. Too much content.
Yeah, that's right.
Good meeting though.
No, it was.
I think we got a lot
man.
done, Ken.
Yeah.